Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open one of the most fascinating and honestly mysterious passages in the entire Old Testament. We're going on a hunt to figure out who or what is this powerful figure called wisdom in the book of Proverbs.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. We start with this incredible voice speaking right out of Proverbs. And this isn't a king or a prophet talking. No, this is wisdom herself, speaking in the first person. And she's claiming to have been right there with God before anything we know existed.
And that really sets up the big mystery for us. What are we looking at here? Is this just some beautiful poetry, a clever way to talk about an idea? Or is the Bible pointing to something way, way deeper? An actual personal being who existed with God from eternity?
So here's our game plan. We're going to look at the original poetry, hunt for clues, and then follow that trail right into the New Testament. We'll see how this one passage sparked a huge historical debate that literally forged a core doctrine of the church. And finally, we'll get to why any of this ancient stuff still really matters today.
All right, first things first, we have to remember where we are. Proverbs is Hebrew poetry, and this kind of writing just loves to take abstract concepts and make them feel alive and real. So, giving wisdom a voice, that's a classic move. It's called personification. And the Bible does this with other ideas too, like folly or justice. But there's something about the way wisdom is portrayed that feels different.
And that's the absolute key. This isn't just a simple metaphor. I mean, think about it. A literary device doesn't rejoice next to God while he's creating the universe. It feels like the poetry itself is trying to tell us that this is something much more than just a figure of speech.
Okay, so let's get our magnifying glass out and look at the text itself. What exactly is this wisdom figure claiming to be and do?
I mean, just look at this list. The claims are staggering. She's not just an attribute of God, like his own wisdom. No, she's a distinct companion, a master craftsman beside him. She commands, judges, and promises life. These are divine actions, not something an abstract idea can do.
And then the plot thickens. The whole mystery, a debate that would echo for centuries, really boils down to one single critical Hebrew word in verse 22. Everything hangs on how you translate this one little word.
And here you have it, the two roads this one word created. When it was translated into Greek, the word they chose was created, and that led some to believe wisdom was the first and greatest creature. But if you look at the original Hebrew, the sense is much more like possessed or brought forth, not being made out of nothing, but coming from God's own being. A huge difference.
So, for hundreds of years, this Old Testament passage was this beautiful poetic mystery. But the key that finally unlocks the whole thing, well, it shows up centuries later in the New Testament.
It turns out the apostles saw this ancient figure of wisdom and said, wait a minute, that's him, that's Jesus. What Proverbs had painted in these poetic shadows, the Gospel of John was about to reveal in broad daylight, in the person of Jesus Christ.
And this right here, this is the big aha moment. Just look at the parallels. They're not just kind of similar, they're direct, intentional echoes. From everlasting becomes in the beginning. I was beside him becomes was with God. The writer of John's Gospel is basically shouting at us, identifying Jesus, the Word made flesh, with the eternal wisdom of God.
This also clears up other passages, like when the New Testament calls Jesus the firstborn of all creation. In our world, that sounds like the first thing created, but in that culture, firstborn was a title. It meant you were the one with supreme rank, the heir of everything. He's the ruler over creation, not the first product of it.
But look, this crystal clear connection we see now wasn't obvious to everyone back then. In fact, this understanding had to be forged in the fire of one of the biggest, most intense arguments in the early church.
This timeline just shows you how it all went down. A translation choice, made hundreds of years before Christ, gets picked up by a priest named Arius. He uses it to argue that Jesus was a created being, not fully God. And this idea spread like wildfire, sparking a crisis that led to the legendary Council of Nicaea.
And this was their conclusion. This line, maybe the most famous line from the Nicene Creed, was written specifically to settle the debate over Proverbs 8. They said the Son is begotten, meaning he eternally comes from the Father, not made like a creature is made.
Okay, so let's quickly clear up a couple of common questions that usually pop up when you talk about this. First, the gender thing. Why is wisdom a she?
Simple answer, it's grammar. The Hebrew word for wisdom, chokmah, is a feminine noun, so the pronouns just follow the language. It's not about biology. Second, that word, begotten. For us, it sounds like something that has a start date, but theologically, it's describing an eternal relationship. Think of it like this. Light is eternally begotten by the sun. It's not like the sun existed for a while and then decided to start shining.
So, after all this deep dive into ancient poetry and church councils, we have to ask the big so what question. Why does a debate from 1700 years ago matter to any of us sitting here today?
Well, it turns out the stakes are massive. How you solve this mystery completely changes your picture of God. Is God fundamentally a solitary monad who only decides to become relational when he creates things? Or is God in his very essence an eternal community of love, Father, Word, and Spirit, who then invites us into that relationship? It changes everything.
And that right there is the ultimate point. This was never just a squabble over words. It's about what salvation even is. Is it just getting a legal pardon from a far-off deity? Or is it something infinitely more incredible, being brought into the very inner life, the very fellowship of God himself? Solving the mystery of wisdom doesn't just change how we read an old poem, it changes the entire story.